Xavier's in Newcastle. Paul's my name. G'day. It's 4:13. You may have already heard today about the changes to mask rules for students at New South Wales schools. From Monday, which is the 28th of February, masks will no longer need to be worn by students or high school staff. Teachers and staff members at primary schools and early childcare centres will need to wear face masks until the following Monday, which is the 7th of March. Pupils from kindergarten to year 6 were encouraged but not required to wear masks under the current restrictions. From next week, parents will be allowed back on school grounds, and cohorting rules, which separated the kids by age groups at school, they'll be scrapped. So some good news that things seem to be getting back to normal at our schools. However, this week, the Department of Education also released its new policies and procedures on suspensions and expulsions, which are to come into effect from the beginning of Term 2. The Minister for Education, Sarah Mitchell, says that this new policy will lead to better outcomes for kids that are struggling. But the New South Wales Teachers Federation has advised its members not to implement the changes, citing concerns over their safety and workload. Here to break it down for us is Dr. David Roy, lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle. David, g'day. Thanks for coming on today.
Good afternoon, Paul. Great to be here.
Now, we know that a lot of our kids, they turn up at school, without uniform, probably haven't been fed, some of them. Many of those poor little blighters have seen things in their lives that they shouldn't have seen. How do we manage the needs of those children with special needs with the broader classroom environment if we're to fully integrate all students into the modern classroom?
Well, schools are there for all kids, and we're there to teach kids. All kids will go through times of difficulties and challenges, whether it's because they have a disability, whether they're from a background, whether it's social economic deprivation, or if they're of their ethnicity, that will cause them to have barriers in the learning process. And the great thing is that good teachers want to teach those kids and say, I want to meet their learning needs. So whatever the label on them, whether there's a specific label or they're just struggling with maths, that's the teacher's role, is to say, how can I get you to the next level and support you? So I don't think there is some of the panic that people say with those teachers that actually are there because they care about the kids. There will be problems, and the systems themselves need to make sure that teachers are being given the supports the teachers need to actually be able to implement the curriculum and support our kids.
Was there a problem that needed to be fixed by the department?
Oh, there definitely was. When we find that 70% of suspensions, and we'll go straight to the behaviour policy, suspensions and exclusions were to children of a disability who make up less than 20% of the population. And the second largest group of suspensions was children who are First Nations people. You kind of start to realise this happening year after year after year might suggest that the system has some kind of inbuilt systemic bias against these people, against these groups of children, whether they've got disability or whether they are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders. And that's why they need to address that. And that's what this new policy is aimed at starting to do. And it's not a massive, significant change.
Under modern education regimes, our principals are pretty much captain of the ship. They've got discretion in most matters, haven't they? Couldn't these matters be handled internally with the sensitivity that a principal at the local level could apply?
Well, there was that local schools, local decision principle put into place, and that's still caused this problem, so that wasn't solving it. We actually don't know of the numbers being suspended if it's all coming from, say, 3 schools in the whole of the state, or if it's equally spread across every school, or how many times the same kid was having challenges and it wasn't supporting them, because the department's not released that data, and we do keep asking. What the department has recognised is that suspensions don't fix these problems. What suspensions do is they can sometimes have a valve release for the school, for the child, but at the same time, if a child is behaving in a way that the school doesn't like, but the child doesn't have control over that behaviour, such as they continually tap their hand on a desk because they have some kind of anxiety disorder, suspending them is a punishment and is not actually going to help them. And in fact, the department recognises suspension shouldn't be used as a punishment. It should be used as a tool, if it's ever used, to try and support the child in the long term.
Okay, so what do the new policies say? How should the issues that arise in the classroom be dealt with?
Well, it says that the parents and the child must be involved in the decision, that we must try other measures where possible to support the child before we go straight to default suspension. It also says that in certain circumstances, kids need to be suspended. If there is a danger to themselves or to other individuals in the classroom, including teachers, that child needs to be suspended. And I get that. That makes complete sense, because safety has to come first. But then they have to look at, well, what caused the situation? What supports does the school have in place? What do we need to change before we force others to change? Are we doing something first? It's like being in a relationship. I watch Maths, Married at First Sight, and I see the correlation. Those people who are falling out with each other in that program, they need to look at themselves first before they tell the other person how bad they are. And I guess that's what we all need to do as educators as well. What are we doing that can be better before we then go to the other direction?
How do teachers take the heat out of the environment and logically work through the processes to arrive at these optimum outcomes?
Well, there is no one way to do that. But the first way is that reflective tool, is to say, what is actually causing this behaviour? What can I change to make it less of an issue? And it can be talking to the kid if they're able to be reasoned with. It can be pulling the kid out for 5 minutes from the situation and removing them from that. But it's not about targeting that kid, because sometimes that can be a badge of honour for certain kids. And what we've also got to realise that a lot of the bad behaviour is actually coming from kids who don't have labels, but we like to kind of highlight the kids with labels because that's easier to admit than to say, you know, kids are kids and they're not adults yet, and so they won't necessarily behave in the way that adults want to. I know what I was like as a kid. I can't believe I wasn't suspended more than I maybe should have been, because we kids like to push boundaries, and we've got to accept kids are kids.
Teachers like kids come in all shapes and sizes, and fuses are shorter in some cases. I'm sure that there are many situations within classrooms that are diffused and no one other than the teacher is ever made aware of it, and it's managed in the classroom to great effect. But for other teachers, of course, some of these behaviours can be quite challenging. Are teachers entitled to be worried? Are they given enough training around psychological matters, particularly those relating to cultural differences and learning difficulties?
I would argue we need to have a lot more training. Whenever I open up my classes for the teachers in training in the university, and I say, well, ask me anything that you want to, not just about the topic we've just done, it will always resolve in them asking me about behaviour management strategies that I've used, I've experienced, I've seen, I've understood, or I've researched. And that tells me that there's that real need to ensure that our teachers are kept up to date in ways to actually support behaviours within classrooms. And that's something this policy said has to happen more, that they're going to use empirical evidence that they know works, rather than just kind of the gossip rule of maybe this might happen or maybe this might work. So long as the system gives the supports it's promising to the teachers, and that doesn't always happen, then this should be able to work. But we all have to come on board with a change if we want to see better outcomes for kids. If we want things to stay the same, then we should do what the union is doing and say, don't change anything. But yes, there should be that discussion to make sure that teachers feel safe and that their voice is heard, as well as the parents and the children. The children need to be heard.
Dave, you're confident that calm heads will prevail here, and the teachers and the department can talk their way through this?
I think we have to have that hope, because if we don't, the inequity in the system is just going to continue. And one of the things that we really want to challenge, I think, in Australia is just how inequitable it is within different teaching systems and also towards certain groups within the classroom. I don't think any teacher that I know wants children with a disability to be targeted. And currently, the data suggests that they are. So we need to change that. The system isn't working at this point.
David, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure, Paul. Anytime.
Dr. David Roy from the University of Newcastle, and it's 23 past 4.